Thank you so much for being with us today on this Sunday afternoon. We are so excited to have, alphabetically, Miss Phoebe Beasley, Louise Mandumbwa, and Anyta Thomas, Miss, Mrs. in different capacities. My name is Anna Hearn. I will be asking the questions today, but I'm not spotlighted for a reason. The spotlight is on our three artists today. This talk is called The Emerging Spirit, a dialogue on evolving. So these three artists are in different stages of their career, and a lot of the questions today will kind of address the evolution of that career, their styles, and their journey. So I'm so excited to be with you all. We'll just jump in. One note to all of our moderator or all of our guests, we are live streaming this to Facebook. So if you don't want to be internet famous, definitely keep your video off. Also, I will be keeping anyone who is not spotlighted, you cannot unmute during the conversation. We will have some time at the end for you all to share your questions as well, pose those questions to the artist. But let's go ahead and get started. Once again, we are here on the occasion of the Women Create exhibit. It is the current show up at Hearn Fine Art featuring 13 women artists. It is a phenomenal show, and it has officially been extended through the end of July. So if you have not had a chance to see it, we definitely welcome you to 1001 Wright Avenue, or if you're not in Little Rock, please visit our website at www.hearnfineart.com. All right. Let's see. So, and feel free to, this is a general question for everyone to kind of touch on. I do have questions for you all specifically, but we'll start with this big one. The title of this panel centers on the concept of an emerging spirit in the act of evolving. When you look at the work you have on display in Women Create compared to what you were making 5 or 10 years ago, what is the most significant way your artistic spirit or technical approach has evolved?
I think I've been looking at more climate issues, and perhaps because I live in Los Angeles and there's such a factor in our lives now, whether it's fires or floods, which is the only seasons we seem to have. And so I've actually created works that address that issue, and trying to look at the history of all of that issue too, because that's what I do. I love to also incorporate ancestral history. Like, this is not the first time things are happening.
Right, if we're going in alphabetical order as well, I'd say thinking about the work that is currently in the show and what preceded it, 5, maybe 6 years prior to the work that is in the show, those are the very first kind of paintings that I was making them to show in an exhibition context. And it's really wonderful to see what has been curated into this show, because that was the beginning, I think, of the questions I allowed myself to ask materially about how I could take a photographic image or a reference and really make it my own. I see in that work a real unpacking of internalized or perhaps learned permission structures that had informed how I was making previously. And some of the works in this show, I believe, are from 2021 to 2023. It really represents the start of what has been a really meaningful and generative evolution in my practice.
I think the way my work differs from maybe 5 or 10 years ago is it's more informed from the whole of the human experience as opposed to individual experiences that people can connect to. For example, the work that's in the show addresses the pandemic, it doesn't address the fear, but it addresses an experience that we all were a part of and coming together. So in the show, that the pieces that are in the show are more so about how we come together from our different skills and address this idea of this pandemic, this experience. The other work that I'm doing, which is also talking about a global experience as opposed to individual experiences that people can connect to, is I'm incorporating um, an aspect of how we should focus on literature and make sure that we uplift um, that voice in kids, and the power of reading and the power of books. So a lot of the work that I'm working on now either incorporates some aspect of books or just has some type of message of uh, we need to be empowered by reading and being informed and knowledge.
I like the fact that you're talking about our history and how important it is to young people. I did an artwork that's on my website. It's called Executive Order 9981. And it is President Truman when he desegregated the armed services in 1948. And most people don't even know, whether it's our parents or certainly our grandparents knew this, that there were two armies. There was a white army and a black army. And so we actually had to desegregate the armed services. And that's what President Truman did in 48. So I use my work as also to go into schools and universities and talk about the importance of understanding where we were in order to understand where we are now. And so thank you. Thank you, Anyta.
And I appreciate you saying that also, because my exploration in just my creative, whatever I feel as though is inspiring me at the moment. One of
Yes.
my big focuses is on connecting the past to the present and how to use the present and the knowledge that we are experiences to inform the future. So that is that part of the message, is to make sure we pass that knowledge on and not just hold it into ourselves. Make sure that the future understands what has happened, knows that it can happen again in some kind of form of way, and how to um, uh, try to figure out either how to change it or just be informed so that you can go a different path.
Thank you. The next question is, growth often requires shedding old habits or perspectives. What is something you had to intentionally unlearn or let go of to allow your current artistic voice to emerge?
I think one of the things I had to unlearn or undo is to look at who was in my life. The people who were in my life who were saying, no, you can't be an artist, you can't do this. And their fear was driving them to tell me this because they had never been an artist. And so sometimes you just have to say, you have to go. You have to stay out of my life or stay out of that subject in my life, because it's not helping my growth and my support and my peacefulness that I can do this. And so I think when you have to look at who's in your life and what they're saying about it, if they're if they're not mirroring your image of what you want for yourself and what you want for your future, then it may be time to say, thank you, but you got to go.
I like that message.
Anyta, would you like to go?
I kind of want to bounce off of what Phoebe was saying, is that uh, some people, they are driven by a lot of people are driven by their fears, and they want to impose their fears on you all the time. And if you are not that person that is really grounded in who you are, it's so easy to be, I guess, uh, malleable to their thoughts, but you got to learn to claim your own thoughts. The one thing that I had to unlearn for myself is that my job as a creative spirit is not to execute the ideas you can't do because you are fearing to be creative. My job as a creative spirit is to see how far I can push whatever skills I've acquired to live the best spirit I can be, not to live the best spirit that you want me to be, but the best spirit I can be.
Wonderful. I think the thing that I have learned, maybe my answer would be twofold. One thing that I really had to unlearn is the idea of having an answer or a right answer. As someone that is fairly recently kind of moved out of my academic study, I really went into my graduate program, my undergraduate program, hoping that I would find the correct answer about how to create a painting or work with a specific material and make a certain kind of work. And the most generative realization I arrived at was maybe the answer is not singular, but it is really meaningful to continue to ask questions. That resolution sometimes isn't having an answer in a traditional sense, but perhaps arriving at even better questions. And I've really come to appreciate that it's not necessarily having a formula, but really thinking about an artistic practice as something that is indeed a practice that is ongoing and evolving, that challenges you as you acquire more skills. So on a technical aspect, I think that's something that I really had to internalize and digest to be able to continue to grow in my practice in a way that I think is meaningful. And then the other thing, maybe thinking about answers or resolution, is trusting your gut. I think so many of us have an internal intuition or a passion or thing that we feel are called to, or you might feel like you have a vocation, something that like is given to you and is a gift that you get to steward, particularly when it is artistic. And you kind of go through life and maybe shrink the amount of influence you allow that particular passion to have because it does not have concrete answers for you. But I find the older that I get, the more I'm able to mature in my practice, the more I'm able to trust that there's something meaningful that I think artists in particular have to offer a conversation with other people, with themselves. And it's meaningful to trust that and pursue it to the best of your ability.
And trying to make a living out of being an artist is something that we're all kind of struggling with. I don't care what age you're getting to, but sometimes you have to do things that are going to help you to pay the rent, gas, light, telephone. And so you have to do other things, but you also have to do two or three other things like being an artist at the same time. I had to do that, and I was also in radio sales, one of the first Black people to and women to be in sales because radio and television, that's where the money was. And then I realized how much I enjoyed it. I love making money. And also that I could do two things. Didn't have a husband, didn't have kids, so it didn't thwart me from having to have two careers. It was a daunting task, but sometimes you just have to say, and you also learn that you have other skills you don't even know that you have witnessed. So uh, think about that when you're also thinking about, I'm only going to do what my peacefulness tells me I need to be an artist, but also I also need to figure this out on how to make a living doing this.
Go ahead, please.
I agree with that, Phoebe. Sometimes you do. You gotta hold down, and I'm you gotta hold down 2, 3 jobs to make sure that those bills are paid. But
Yes.
one thing that I did learn, just in the multiple roles that we usually hold, one thing that I learned is that as I'm working, as at the 9 to 5 and then the part times and then being a mom, that I didn't have to give up being an artist. I didn't have to sacrifice my art in order to do those other things that had to be done to pay the bill. Because when I tried to just put that aside, I fell apart. The art is therapeutic. and for me to try to give that up, which is a central part of me, central part of my being, is to allow the world to not allow me to be myself anymore. And that was a hard lesson to learn, but I'm glad I'm still navigating it, and I share my creative spirit and my lessons with my daughter, and that's another way how I incorporate my creative energy, whether I'm sculpting or writing. I'm making sure that I'm feeding that creative energy so that is not lost in this world we have to just hustle for.
Yes. And at some point, we just have to be appreciative of the Hearn Fine Art for being out here for 38 years to making that possible. Because when I was coming along in Cleveland, Ohio, there were no galleries of color. And so we had to start our own artists who got together. I was an art teacher in high school, and there were 10 of us, and we found a storefront that was empty. And so what we started doing was, okay, everybody put in $10 a month, and we'll have a place to paint, and we can just do that in the evening, and then we'll have shows when we can. So being the mother of invention, as you are being a mother, Anyta, that, you have to just, oh goodness, so much is offered, but also so much is in our way inventing of how we're going to do this. So thank you for the Hearn Art Gallery, for Garbo Hearn for being out here, for Anna for being out here all of these years to help us navigate this this road we're on. Thank you.
Mhm.
We are appreciative that you all allow us to represent you. Moving into medium, materiality, and form. These are specific questions. We'll just start with Anyta. Your wire mesh sculptures have this incredible, almost weightless quality that captures movement, music, and ancestral energy. How does manipulating such an industrial, rigid material allow you to express the fluid, intangible nature of the spirit? Big question.
Interesting question. And I'm glad that you sent these questions in advance. Um, because they're loaded questions. One thing that I thought about is that my chosen medium, or the medium that has chosen me, we have it's a synergy there. And maybe, the other artists on this panel definitely experienced that with their chosen medium. But I feel as though with my medium, there's a correlation, there's a connection between being human and and the quality of what it is. And what I mean by that is my medium, some of the qualities that it has that's human is that it's rigid, and it can be stubborn to manipulate, and it can be just the structurally immovable sometimes, and it just is can be the other thing it can do is it doesn't it holds stress, it holds tension, it's resilient when it doesn't want to move a certain way, and all of these qualities we hold as human beings that you try to force us to go a direction that we don't want to go, we are going to kind of fight back. And that's kind of what my medium does. If I bend it a certain way, it doesn't want to go that way, so I have to work with it. And that's another human quality: collaboration with other people, and allowing yourself to be open to a different way of thinking. And that material allows me to do that too. So when people ask me to try to conform myself to a particular drawing, sometimes I'm resistant because I like the outcome of the material once I work through the struggle and the problems, and figuring out what the outcome is going to be. Such like a human being, once we overcome those obstacles, once we get through those struggles, how rewarding it is to come out on the other side in a way that we didn't imagine. And I feel as though my material, when I'm working with it, I like the surprise of going into it unsure of the direction. I might have a slight concept, but I don't try to work it out, because then I'm forced to conform to the concept. So I might have a light concept or a name or the concept of just having a kid with a book. And then I go at it and I work with the material in unison to come up with an idea in the end. So I hope that answers the question, but that's the direction that I feel as though with me and the material. And the lightness, yes, the light. I feel as though that's kind of metaphoric. That the product that it ends up being after I work through whatever it was when it was in its raw form, such as us in our human raw form, where it's hard and we just don't want to move. And in the end, we end up being lighter and don't have that heaviness on our shoulder, or a lot of people can't see what we're carrying. I like that quality of the screen having that surprise where it's on the wall, you look at it, it might look soft, and it might have this gesture that doesn't take on what it actually is. And same thing with humans. So it's like I like that fact that it looks heavy, but yet when you touch it and you carry it, it's light. And we have that quality. So I love my material, as you can see.
Thank you. We absolutely love it as well. All right. So, Louise, your portraits utilize delicate balances of charcoal, pastel, and sometimes unconventional surfaces like plexiglass to capture profound intimacy and vulnerability. How does choosing these specific mediums help you trace what you've called the delicate residues of relationships across time and geography?
Thank you, Anna. Just for how thoughtful the questions are as well. I think for me, I often think in a very literal fashion. And I'm always really interested in how the ideas that are maybe motivating the work can be conveyed not just in the images that are selected, which are very often of people, because my work is truly about people and the people that I get to be in community and relationship with. But the things that undergird those relationships. And I think precarity is something that comes to mind. I truly enjoy drawing and working on paper in particular because of the ephemeral nature of the materials. It feels like it relates very much to how memory functions for myself, and I know for many other people. It doesn't remain the same. Memory shifts and it moves and it softens at the edges and it changes over time with wear and tear, the way that paper does, the way that charcoal does in particular. I think there's something about an emergence of the image that feels really important to me, like a memory that is like coming into focus, which is how I experience it. I'm often thinking about absence and presence and approximation, and how when we try and recall things, it doesn't always come to us all at once. And that's happening in the image, but it's also for me really important that that happens in the material choices that are being made. So there's something about being able to draw, of course, and draw on paper, but also thinking about the gestures of embossing and printmaking, making impressions directly into the paper that are made without any sort of ink or pigment, that become about a trick of light and like where you are in the room in relation to the work and what you're able to see. What that continued engagement with the work allows you to discover, I think the more time you spend with the work. And then kind of thinking of the counter to working on paper, plexiglass and other surfaces that are maybe non-traditional, not as conventional, really meaningfully came to me, to think of the things that are maybe more solid, kind of in conversation with the things that feel like they're slipping in the juxtaposition that that could offer. I'm also thinking about transparency, what it means to see through a thing or have your ability to see a thing be mediated by light and by distance and texture. And so I'm thinking maybe on many levels how the ideas that really motivate my practice and the decisions that I'm making in the image making also being echoed in the material choices that I get to make. And it's really wonderful to revisit these works in particular because this was the very beginning of those questions that I think continue to get more complex and more layered. And the answers to which really start, I can find the breadcrumbs of the answers I've arrived at in the works that are in the show right now.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least,
Sure.
for
I,
Phoebe.
I
Oh,
started
go ahead.
with oil paint at one point in my early iterations, and then uh, acrylic came along. For me, it was just too fast a media in terms of drying. And I was used to the warmth and the subtleties of oil and using it with water or turpentine but more importantly, I moved to texture and the textures of material, the textures of paper. Oh, goodness, I would walk into a paper store and just for hours, just being there was such a delight. And so using those textures and using real objects because I wanted my artwork to begin to feel like stop action that you might see in a theater. If you were going to learn something about it, like one that I did with Zora and Langston, I wanted people to be able to understand what they wore in the 30s and 40s and 50s rather than feel as though they were comfortable with whatever they had on. And so when you're doing figurative work, primarily, at one point I wanted to add lights. And so I backlit my artwork and put it into a plexi box. And so I was thinking of, I also wanted to add music into that iteration because I thought it was so important that if you have something and you're talking about McCoy Tyner or Phineas Newborn Jr. or Dexter Gordon, you need the music also to work with the art. And so adding all of those technical issues to my artwork, where you plug it in and it lights up, uh, became part of how I was thinking about each artwork. And sometimes you think it's too unaffordable. It doesn't make sense. And so you'd have to redo it. I started working on plain plexiglass, and then working on the front and back to see what's coming through that plain plexi that gives us another dimension of the artwork, like you're walking through it. So all of those things over time and over years have become a part of how, you just sit down and one night, all of this comes to you, and then you have to figure out how to do it technically that makes sense. And it's workable that you can actually uh, do something that's in your mind's eye and get it to your hand and out on the canvas. So it's been a challenge sometimes. So anyway, that's I'll stop there.
I think you've already started to answer my question for you, but I will pose it. Your work is heavily rooted in collage, combining texture, memory, and narrative, often in deep dialogue with African American literary history like Langston Hughes. How does the physical act of layering different materials mirror the way that we piece together memory and history over time?
I'm not sure I can answer. I know that when you're reading history and seeing uh, photos, paintings from historical references, some of that comes to mind that I want to use in texture. The artwork that's in the show that you have at the Hearn Fine Art is problems on track 39. Well, in my generation, there were always problems with people marching, people trying to get oh goodness, the Voter Rights Act passed or the Civil Rights Act, and so, or going to the South and desegregating the buses and the trains and and so when you saw all of this happening, to be able to do that from memory, how people would just stop, cross hands, and start singing "We Shall Overcome." I wanted people to remember what that was like. And for those who weren't here, weren't born, or didn't care, that they would have some reference as to what the problems on track 39 were. And oh goodness. And to have the sleeping car porters, which was A. Philip Randolph, who started that, made one of the first unions of Black men. Uh, and they were on every sleeping car. and I thought of them as super chiefs. But to try and put that luggage and that person in that blue uniform and to make him our hero in all of this, because he had to work through it. He had to decide to feed his family and still get on those trains and serve, segregated stops and people who are in segregated cars. So I wanted that memory to be part of our history because a lot of it is not written. Um, I'm on the foundation board of the Kinsey Collection. Bernard and Shirley Kinsey have had this book that goes back to the 15th century of African Americans in America. And so to be able to uh, have that kind of information in one book is just quite startling and they've collected all of this artifacts and paintings from the 15th century on. So it's a very important book that is now in high schools. It's in other countries. It's been in most of the states in America. So I'm pleased that someone has actually put all of that about us in one book. So.
Thank you. Now we will move into navigating identity. The subtitle of this exhibition is Space, Grace, and Power. And anyone is welcome to answer this question. I hope we'll hear from all of you all. As Black women artists navigating the contemporary art world, how do your works claim space, extend grace to your subjects or yourself, and redefine power? I'm gonna repeat that. I'm gonna repeat the question. As Black women artists navigating the contemporary art world, how do your works claim space, extend grace to your subjects or yourself, and redefine power?
Well, at the time that I was trying to get in some of these galleries, the important circle of friends were the ones who were making sure that if there was a door that needed to be open, they were going to help me get through it. Whether it was Dr. Maya Angelou, who became a dear friend and supporter, and people who were starting to collect my work, whether you did it and you only had a show in a library or in a hospital, they were there surrounding me saying, we got you, we got you, we got your back, Phoebe. We will be with you on this journey because we know how important you are. So that peacefulness happened for me because I had such my family, I don't have any family left. And so my friends are my family. And to have that kind of circle of friends, a circle of family of friends who believe so much in my work, it was hard not to believe it myself. And we're all at a stage where we think, am I good enough even to be out here? And yet you have enough people who are supporting your work to say, just stay out here. You okay. You're doing okay. And even if you're not, you're not making as much as someone else, you have a family of friends that you care more about than whether you make the next sale of your work because they have been so important. So that's my gracefulness. And it's not a heavy weight. My history is not a heavy weight. If anything, it's a heavy privilege to have a family that cared so much about me and that uh, they made sure that whatever I wanted to do, they would help me do it. So I am grateful and thankful. And that's what I suggest that we all get is a group of friends who have a sense of humor, are grateful, thankful for what came before them because they didn't get here by themselves. And when you're grateful for your past, you begin to understand where you can take your future. Okay, I'm through.
Would anybody
I
else
know
like
you're
to touch on
thinking.
the subject?
Did I even talk on the subject that you asked about?
No, it was
I
great.
think you
It was
did.
wonderful.
I'm gonna try to go in the direction that you presented it. So claiming space. It reminds me of the first moment I realized I had something going. So when I was in University of Delaware, we had a final project. The teacher gave everybody in the class the rules. The rules were to only had to build something 5 foot. It can either be standing or it could be on the wall, 5 feet, using the skills that we learned all semester. You can only spend $10, or you could use the backyard that had materials, scraps. I chose to save that $10 because I needed it for lunch and dinner, and I went in the scrap and I got chicken wire. I created the project out of chicken wire. I'm not going to go the direction, but it was a comedic piece. I presented it in the class. I was one of, I believe, one of three or one of four females, and I was the only African American in my class. At the time that I was at University of Delaware, it was 4% Black. When I presented this project, everybody laughed. And the teacher asked why certain the guys, why were they laughing, and they said, well, she can't use that as a final project. That's meant to be used for plaster. That's meant to be used as just an armature for something that needs to be final. That's not used, you can't use that raw material as a final project. Now, of course, that made me feel down, but the next thing basically kicked me off on my journey. The teacher response was, why can't she? That made me feel positive because I was like, okay, that trigger, that comment alone made me say, well, if they're laughing, that means it's something that they haven't seen before. So that triggered my journey from there. So ever since that moment, I didn't care the reaction that I got from the journey that I was on. I put in 50, remember writing 50, just proposals to different galleries. I didn't want to get rejected once. So I said, let me just do it all at once, pull it in the mail and see where it goes. So in the end, after doing that, I had three responses. That was Sandy Webster, that was Hearn, and that was Art Jazz. They said I had something. So all this inspired me to keep going and building on something that I knew was an innate skill to me. So and the point to this was that I had to believe in something in me to not allow the world to deter me from a journey that I believe I was meant to be on. So you got that part was claiming my space. I make sure that no matter what art influences me, that's a part of my journey and I can incorporate it in my piece if I want to. It's not about you guys, it's about me. The being a part of what you say, you space, you said grace. I want to make sure that it elevates people in the end. It teaches that you can do something too, or you can receive it how you want to receive it. But I want it ultimately to give you joy or to remind you of something positive, because we don't need that negative and we don't need things to keep us down. So those are my jewels on the question that was asked. I hope that it helps.
And I love that. I might need to take a note from your book and start sending lots of letters and emails all in one
They
go.
don't do that anymore now. I'm telling you, it's all digital. I was putting this stuff in the mail in packages on the white little envelopes. So got it lucky these days. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
everything in the mail. And I guess to maybe offer my response to the question, as far as like space and grace specifically, I think in my own practice, a question that I received in my training and kind of beyond was about the amount of negative space in the work, the blank space in the work. And that's a decision that was really intentional on my part because I have always and continue to feel that it is the relationships with people that ground me as opposed to architectural things or objects. And that is the conversation that I am always hoping to have. And I've doubled down in that I'm making larger works in some ways. I'm expanding the field that I'm working within, the image field. But I still do not feel the need to put things in the background for the sake of putting them there. I try to be incredibly intentional about what I am thinking about and what is being included and the restraint that I think is a part of my process. I really value the conversations, the focused conversations it allows me to have. And to touch on grace, I think for me, grace exists in the process. It is incredibly important to me to handle with great care the individuals that honor me by allowing me to represent their likeness in my practice. And I do that by really building relationships with them. I've been grateful to make work in all of the spaces that I have called some version of home over the last decade, and that has been Arkansas, and it's been Virginia, and it's been New Haven. But I've always been very intentional to make sure that I actually have some relationship with the people that live in this space that call this place home and learn their stories and learn their names, and understand something of their background and what they value and what they look forward to. And I think down to the naming convention that I have adopted, which is often just the name of the people that I am making the work of, it feels incredibly important. In particular, when I'm spending time with people that might not be native to the US, that might, like myself, be immigrants, to recognize that the effort it takes, though very small, to say someone's name correctly is incredibly meaningful for people. In some instances, they are coming into spaces with not much to their name other than the love that they have from the people that care for them dearly and the name that was given to them by the people that love them. And so I think small gestures like that are incredibly important to me. I have an interview process, and I genuinely spend time, often multiple sessions, just in conversation, getting to know the people that I'm spending time with, so that when they are not in the room and their likeness is, and I'm asked questions about who they are and what they're excited about, I am able to represent them to the best of my ability as I have come to know them. So for me, that is space and grace in my work. I still maybe am finding my way as far as like power and what that looks like. And I'm specifically thinking about access and the privilege I have had to be in spaces with other artists of color, other people that are creatively inclined, and the questions that we've been able to kind of figure out on our time together on what it might look like to reimagine what it means to access work and information, who has permission to come into a space, even if that permission is not literal, who feels comfortable enough to come into a space and ask questions and engage with the work. And so I think for myself in my own practice, that is where I see power being situated. It's thinking about access and accessibility and permission, and being very intentional about creating environments where people feel welcome to come in and not know anything and learn, rather than feel intimidated or unwelcome to come into a space and engage with the work.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I only have a couple or maybe two questions before I turn it over to our audience, our other participants on the call. I really like this question. How do you strike a balance between carrying the profound weight of ancestral history and collective memory and maintaining the absolute freedom to innovate and change as individual creators?
I think my approach to having the balance is to make sure that my story is told in some kind of way, whether it's through my artwork. Actually, it's through the artwork and through writing, because as we all know that once we are not here, if our voice is not recorded, people have that freedom of creating a voice for us or telling our story not correctly. So I feel as though it's part of our responsibility to ourselves and to our ancestors to make sure that our journey that helps others and ourselves and whoever we bring along is told from our voice and recorded in our voice, however we see may fit. And also, we have that responsibility to the next generation of our seeds, that making sure that they know their power in their voice, making sure that they know who they are, making sure they know who we are, so that they know that they are an extension of power. And that's my thought.
I think it helps me to stay out here, and that is to be around young people and to make sure that they can see the embodiment of someone who has been an artist for, I don't know, 60 years or so, that and it helps to tell our story, whether it's that how we got here, what's open to them that they can take advantage of all the different things that are on a computer in showing your work, but that we can also give them strength in the fact that we are still able to do and able to stay out here and tell our history. If we decide that, no, goodness, uh, we just want to do this and do our work. And some people have decided to do just that. But for me, as being a former high school art teacher, and having the heart of a teacher, I want to stay as close to high schools and universities and foster care systems and prison systems to let them know that there's a better way and that all of us had to struggle to get to where we are. So continuing to tell our story or even to show it and then to tell it, using your art to show and then to tell it is one of the ways that, oh goodness, it helps to get to young people. And that's probably my biggest focus at this time in a life, uh, that there's so much that needs, that I think young people need to know about our history.
This is a really interesting question. Maybe because my responses feel like they riff on things that I've said a little bit earlier in this discussion. I think capital H history, if I can put it that way, can feel so vast and so broad. There is so much information to contend with at times, that it feels like it's hard to do justice to it all. And I think my perspective comes from something I've discovered in my own studio practice, which is there's a version of a history or a story that is told from a top down perspective, cartographically trying to capture it all. And I'm really interested in having work that is acknowledging history, but is perhaps thinking what it would look like to tell that story from the ground up. So to kind of enter into stories, histories, that are geopolitical in nature, that are sociological in nature, that start from the lived experiences of individuals, then kind of open up into the context that shape that person's experience. And I think the freedom part of the question, like how do you find freedom thinking about that something as important as history and collective memory, and ancestral history as well, and think about how you relate to it as an individual. I think the one-to-one is the thing that I feel like I can do very well. That it is sometimes the stories that don't feel particularly grand or important enough, that are left to the wayside, but they really are emblematic of what we are experiencing day to day. Sometimes there is a portrait of society that is offered through one person's story or experiences. And I think for myself, meaningfully, the stories of several people and their different experiences kind of paint a portrait of what it means to be around in this moment that people in the future can look back at. So that is maybe what the balance looks like for me. Um, Reckoning with the fact that there is a history. We're living in a moment that will be history at some point, and there's things that have happened prior to our time here, and trying to think about doing the small things, the one-to-one well, and hoping that that offers windows into people's experiences and their relationships with history as well, and offering that as something that maybe is an annotation or lives alongside like a bigger history, is how I've approached it in my practice.
Excellent. So I'm going to pause my questions. I will ask like the final question. It's fun. But we do have a question from Miss Pam Vance in Austin. She is asking, what are your thoughts about AI in art? And try to answer this very succinctly. I know we could have a whole conversation about this, and we might need to very soon. But, give us your you know, 40,000 feet answer on that.
I'm the Neanderthal woman here. And the least time I spent even on television, people have to talk to me like television had not even been invented because it takes so much of your time, to say nothing of what a computer does. And so I don't have most of those things, whether it's Netflix or whatever is on there. I think I have 6 channels because my time, or as my attorney says, time is of the essence. And when you don't have that much time and you're paying so much attention to crazy stuff or to non-entities or things that don't matter, uh, it gets to be painful that we're spending so much time uh, in what I consider a useless way. So, oh goodness, trying to AI, I've seen my work on books and pulled up in Brazil that they had it on the cover. I don't, I can go after those folks who did that, but to have time to do all of that or the money to do it, sometimes I do. But again, it's become, we're not going to stop it. We're not going to, we just have to, if we have a voice and AI is a part of whatever we're doing, whether it's doing a film, you can insist on certain things that should not happen with AI and your image. So, but I'm not sure we can stop this train. Sorry. Anyone else?
Yeah, AI is a is a pain to me. um, I I understand the need to expedite tasks. I understand that. But in the act of trying to do that, I don't like the fact that you lose yourself. And my thing is, I don't want to lose myself to something that is not human. So, but in the same sense that I am, attempt to be a anti AI in my artwork, then you have the corporate environment that forces you to learn things in order to ride the train into innovation and into the future and all that kind of stuff. So you're forced to learn certain things. So the best thing I can do is to learn the things that I need to get the things done, but try not to allow it to um, force me to lose myself. And that's why I love something so tactile as the chosen medium that I have. I can escape the digital world and say, hey, this is something I can touch. I don't have to watch it through a box on TV. So yes, that's my voice on AI.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know everything there is to know, of course, about AI because it's evolving so quickly. And there's different use cases for AI, right? There's maybe artists that are thinking about using AI to generate reference images and are working off of that. There are people who are maybe not as artistically inclined that see it as a cool thing that lets them engage in making images in a way that they might not be able to in terms of a skill level as of yet. I think the deeply unfortunate thing about AI is that, of course, it's trained on the work of real artists. And people talk about 10,000 hours and the amount of slow learning and discovery and mistakes that create someone's signature artistically or otherwise. It's really unfortunate that there's a system that can take years and years of effort of not just one artist, but many artists and use that effort and labor that creates something distinct to iterate and sometimes iterate not well at all. Maybe I can say often, maybe not iterate well at all. I think the thing that makes an art practice really valuable, to borrow a word that Anyta had used earlier, is how intrinsically connected it feels to our being. that we are pulling from our real lives and our real emotions. And there is an absolute tactility to the learning that happens that informs a person's practice. It feels so intimate and singular. And I'm not a fan of that being taken and mechanized. Not just the non-human part of it, but I think there's at times a speed that the world wants things to be produced at that is not sustainable for an artist to produce like 50 things in a week, right? And I feel like it takes away from the real time that I think adds value to the work when you're able to press a button and like have 200 versions of a thing in the blink of an eye. It's also interesting to interact with this question as someone that is finding my feet as an educator and is in a college classroom where the university systems and students in classrooms are still kind of understanding what use cases make sense. AI is something that is here and people are interacting with. And it's becoming so integrated into the technologies that we use that sometimes when you do not intend to use AI, you are engaging with it still. It's being built into the softwares that we use. So, like Photoshop, for example, has some capabilities that are like useful tools that are actually AI. When you go to Google and you ask a question now, like it is actually also like offering you an AI generated answer, even if you're not seeking it out. I think there's maybe immediate reaction that can be negative when AI comes up in conversation. And maybe a productive conversation, not for this moment, is how do we reckon with encouraging students and young people in particular who are at this point in time where they're learning their own voice and like figuring things out? How do we continue to facilitate and encourage discovery of an artistic fashion when there are these shortcuts that are presented that might feel like an easy way to get at an answer? Like, what does it look like to slow down and really value the human learning process and the pace of the human learning process, which is not immediate, not the press of the button, but like real slow thought and inquiry and discovery? How does that like become a part of the conversations that we're having, not just with practicing artists, but with artists that are discovering their practices and thinking about a practice and will have to reckon with the reality of AI being in there with the images of the work that they're creating in the world.
Thank you very much. And now we are coming to the end of our time together. Does anyone else from our audience have any questions? You are welcome to unmute and ask your question or put it in the chat like Miss Vance did. We do have a question from Marjorie Williams Smith, another artist featured in Women Create. She says, what a fantastic conversation. To each artist, do you feel your work refuels your spirit during these challenging times?
I do. I feel as though my work has been doing that. And it's probably because I try to keep as much media out of my life. And so my spirit and my heart and my soul can still have a resting place and a place of imagination. And but again, I've learned that there's a lot I don't need to have in my life in order to make it work. And so I'm trying to downsize all the media that I don't feel as though it's offering me uh, a good example of what I'd like in my brain.
I would say increasingly so. A lot of my practice is thinking about memory and history and migration over time. So I'm often making work looking back in retrospect of things that have happened in the past. But I think since I'm looking at that usually in a familial context over the last few years, it has kind of been catching up with where I am in terms of time. And so I feel increasingly so I'm thinking about what is happening in this moment and it's finding its way into the work.
I agree also that, like both Phoebe and uh, Louise touched on, that it's a tactile connection that kind of fills us up. Um, I don't like the fact that I'm glad that media doesn't is not a part of my artwork. I'm not no bad news to anybody else who's using media, but I'm glad to be able to have that direct connection with my artwork that I don't have to go print out or do something outside of just existing with the medium that I have and critically solving problems with the media that I have. And I think that's one of the things that gets lost with artists that don't allow themselves to just create from nothing, and instead of trying to find a source, instead of using your innate being inside to be the starting point instead of a tool. So I really do feel like in these times that my art does allow me to just stay grounded.
I think that was a really appropriate question to end on. I loved each and every one of your responses. Thank you so much for joining us today. My mom reminded me, we want to make sure that we recognize every artist present today and where you are, and she wants me to apply these labels, but of course, Louise is our emerging artist on the call. Miss Anyta would be considered our mid-career, and then we have a master artist, Miss Phoebe Beasley, on the call. So this was an excellent conversation between three women who are in various stages of their career. Thank you so much. I am going to stop talking. If you all want to have some closing words, we'll close out. But I am done. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity.
Anna Rose, I just want to thank you so very much for your questions, for your interview, and for taking the time and effort to do this. I appreciate it.
Yes, you are very much appreciated, Anna, all the hard work that you put in this, and I appreciate you. I appreciate being on this panel, you ladies, you queens. I appreciate the conversation. It was beautiful, wonderful. Kudos to all that you do and continue your journey and stay blessed.
I similarly have a just vote of thanks, not just for this conversation, but for the exhibition, and the several other women artists that we are in conversation with at Fern Fine Art. It's been an absolute privilege as the emerging artist in the group to listen to the words of wisdom and learn from so many of you in different contexts. And I'm deeply appreciative for the opportunity to continue to do so.
Thank you again. Just as a reminder, we welcome you to 1001 Bright Avenue in Little Rock, Arkansas to see the show. Just got a closing date of July 11th. Also, the show is available online at www.hearnfineart.com. And with that, I will wish everyone a happy Sunday afternoon. Thank you.